It was supposed to be just another holiday weekend. 4 long days that everyone looks forward to, the kind of break where families pack their cars, hit the road, and pretend for a little while that life is nothing but laughter, sandwiches in coolers, and music on the radio. It was supposed to be just another holiday weekend. 4 long days that everyone looks forward to, the kind of break where families pack their cars, hit the road, and pretend for a little while that life is nothing but laughter, sandwiches in coolers, and music on the radio. I had been ready since sunrise. My suitcase stood by the door, neat and packed. My shirt was freshly pressed, smelling faintly of starch. My old cap, the one Marlene gave me years ago, rested on my lap as I sat waiting. I'd even tucked my blood pressure pills into a little toiletry bag, because that's what responsible men do, we prepare. I remember looking at those bags and feeling proud. At 78, I wasn't fast anymore, but I was still part of things. I thought I was about to join my family on one more trip, one more chance to be included. But then my son stepped into the room. His face was serious in a way I'd never seen before. He didn't fidget, didn't look away, didn't soften his words. He looked straight at me and said something that sliced through me like a blade I never saw coming. "We voted. You're not coming with us anymore. Old people belong at home." The words rang in the air, heavy, final. At first, I laughed, because how else do you handle a punch to the chest from your own blood? I thought maybe he was joking, or maybe he was angry about something else and just lashing out. But he wasn't smiling. He wasn't teasing. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed. I looked at him, suitcase by my side, and tried to understand. The weight of a word. People don't realize how heavy one sentence can be until it lands on them. That day, those words carried more weight than all the luggage in the hallway combined. "You're not coming." 3 words that said, "You are excluded. You are unnecessary. You are a burden." I tried to speak, to ask what he meant, but the lump in my throat stopped me. The suitcase by the door mocked me, proof that I had believed I still belonged. He kept talking, something about how it was easier this way, how the kids needed space, how holidays weren't the same anymore. I barely heard him. My ears were buzzing, my chest felt hollow. I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind him of the countless trips I had taken him on as a boy, the time we camped by the river and he cried when the tent collapsed, the time we drove 6 hours to see the ocean for the first time. I wanted to say, "How dare you forget?" But all I managed was a whisper. I already packed, packing memories. The truth is, the suitcase wasn't just filled with clothes, it was filled with hope, with the belief that I was still part of the team. Every folded shirt carried a memory, this one for evenings around the campfire, that one for walks through small towns where we'd get ice cream. Even the cap was a memory, Marlene's laughter when she first gave it to me, saying I looked too serious without it. And now all of it sat useless, waiting for a trip I wasn't invited to. I sat down, staring at that suitcase, and realized that growing old wasn't about wrinkles or slower steps. It was about being packed away like luggage that no one wants to carry. The silence after, when the house finally went quiet after the car pulled out of the driveway, after the voices faded down the road, I sat in my chair with nothing but the tick of the clock. The silence was heavier than the words had been. I thought about calling Arthur, my oldest friend, the one who had hauled freight with me back in the day. He would have barked at me, told me my son was an idiot, told me to grab a beer and stop sulking. I thought about calling Mrs. Carter next door. She would have marched over with her apron still on, biscuits in her hand, scolding me for even thinking about feeling sorry for myself. But I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, staring at that suitcase, listening to the silence grow louder. A father's reckoning. You spend your whole life raising your children to stand on their own. You teach them to ride bikes, to fix trucks, to sign their names. And you think maybe foolishly that in return they'll keep a space for you at their table. But life doesn't work like a fair trade. Children grow, and sometimes they grow away. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to pound the table, to tell him he'd regret this one day. But beneath the anger was something worse. Doubt. What if he was right? What if old people do belong at home? What if I had outlived my usefulness? The questions gnawed at me until I finally stood up, grabbed the suitcase, and carried it back to my bedroom. I set it by the closet, where it sat like a monument to rejection, talking to Marlene. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo of Marlene on the dresser. Her smile was frozen in time, her eyes full of the same patience she always had when I stumbled. "I don't know what to do," I whispered to her. "I raised him, I gave him everything I had, and now he says I don't belong." The photo didn't answer, of course. But in the quiet, I imagined what she would have said. She would have told me not to let bitterness take root. She would have told me that worth doesn't vanish just because someone else refuses to see it. But believing that was harder than hearing it. The first night alone. I didn't sleep much that night. The bed felt bigger than it had in years. Every creak of the house sounded like a reminder that I was alone. I replayed his words again and again. "You're not coming with us. Old people belong at home." Each time I heard it in my head, it cut deeper. Around midnight, I got up, walked into the kitchen, and made toast. Toast had become my ritual, my anchor. The smell filled the house, soft and familiar. I sat at the table with my toast and coffee, writing in my notebook. Am I furniture now? Just something to be left behind? I stared at the words until the ink blurred. Reflection. That weekend, while families filled highways and beaches, I stayed behind. My suitcase remained by the closet. My house became both my shelter and my prison. And in those quiet hours, I began to realize that maybe this wasn't just about one holiday. Maybe it was about something bigger, about the way families change, about the way age strips away your seat at the table if you're not careful. It was the beginning of a story I never expected to live. A story not about travel or vacations, but about finding out what home really means when your own family tells you not to come along. The second day, after they left, was worse than the first. Day one, at least, I still had the shock to distract me. The words were fresh, raw, bouncing around my head like echoes in an empty church. But by day two, the echoes had quieted, leaving me with the silence. And silence, I learned, is heavier than anger. Breakfast alone. I woke early, the way old men do. The sun hadn't even stretched over the horizon yet. The bed felt too big, the air too still. I shuffled into the kitchen, made my usual toast, poured my coffee, but without company, without chatter or clatter. The toast didn't taste like freedom anymore. It tasted like cardboard. The coffee tasted like ash. I sat at the table, staring at the chair where my son usually sat when he visited. Empty. The seat looked back at me like it was asking, "So what now?" Remembering the trips. It's strange how rejection makes you remember things you thought you'd forgotten. I kept seeing flashes of all the trips we'd taken together when he was young. One summer, we drove 3 states just to see a ball game. The car broke down halfway there, and we ended up spending the night in a tiny town with one diner. My son complained at first, but later he said it was the best trip we ever took because it wasn't planned, because it was ours. Another time, we camped by the river. The tent collapsed in the rain, and we spent the night huddled in the truck, eating soggy sandwiches and laughing at our own bad luck. Back then, he used to look at me like I was invincible, like I was the anchor that kept the world steady. And now he looked at me like luggage, too heavy to carry, easier to leave behind, talking with Arthur. By the 3rd day, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I called Arthur. He answered with his usual growl. "Benjamin, what's wrong? You sound like a man whose house just told him it was leaving." I chuckled despite myself. "Close. My son left. Took the family. Told me I wasn't coming with them anymore. Said old people belong at home. There's everyone pleasant-grained." There was a long pause. Then Arthur's voice, low and sharp. "That boy's out of his damn mind. I think he believes he's right." I said. Arthur snorted. Believing don't make it true. Listen, Ben, you're not furniture. You're not some lamp to be left in the corner. You're the man who taught him to ride a bike, to tie a knot, to be stubborn enough to make it through life. He forgets that. Then I'll remind him myself. I smiled, grateful. Thanks, Arthur. But after the call ended, the house grew quiet again, and the silence reminded me that no matter how much Arthur barked, he couldn't fill the empty seat at the table. A visit from Mrs. Carter. The next morning, Mrs. Carter knocked on the door. She stood there with her apron still dusted with flour, holding a tray of biscuits. Benjamin, she said, marching inside before I could answer, why is your mailbox so full I nearly tripped over it? I've been distracted, I admitted. She set the biscuits on the table, hands on her hips. Distracted, my foot. You're sulking. I can see it in your eyes. What happened? I told her. About the suitcase, the words, the silence. Her face hardened. Your son actually said that? Out loud? With his own mouth? I nodded. She smacked the table. Lord, give me strength, because if I see that boy, I'll wring his neck. Old people belong at home. Home is wherever family is. And if he can't see that, then maybe he needs new glasses. I laughed, the first real laugh since it happened. Thank you, Mrs. Carter. Don't thank me yet, she said, sliding the biscuits closer. Thank me after you eat 3 of these. You look like a man who hasn't had a proper meal since Nixon was president. Writing in the notebook, that night I opened my notebook again. I wrote, Day 4 without them. Silence is louder than arguments. Maybe I am old, maybe I am slow, but I still feel everything, and that has to mean something. I closed the notebook and stared at the suitcase still by the closet, still packed, still waiting. Reflection. Sometimes, being left behind feels like the end of the world. But I was beginning to suspect it was just the beginning of another story. A story I hadn't chosen, but one I was going to have to live. They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from someone you've spent your life protecting. And I can tell you that saying is truer than any proverb carved in stone. Because words can wound, yes. My son telling me I was too old to come along had left a bruise on my spirit that wouldn't heal. But paper has a different kind of cruelty. Paper doesn't just bruise you. Paper erases you. The envelope. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of those dull, ordinary days when the air sits heavy and nothing seems to matter. I had walked out to the mailbox the way I always did, shuffling across the porch, cane tapping the boards like a drumbeat of age. Bills, flyers, advertisements. Junk mail with bright colors promising discounts I didn't care about. And then, there it was. A plain, white envelope. Thick, formal. My name printed neatly on the front, the return address stamped with a law office I didn't recognize. I carried it inside, my stomach tightening with each step. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten breakfast with my son for years, and slit the envelope open with a shaky hand. The paper inside crackled like dry leaves, black letters marched across it, polite and professional. But the words they might as well have been daggers. This letter is to confirm the transfer of retirement assets, accounts, and associated benefits as authorized by your trustee. I read it once, then again, and again. Each time, the meaning struck harder. My retirement, my savings, the money I had sweated and bled for, the reward of decades hauling freight, paying bills, raising a family. That money was no longer mine. It had been signed over, transferred. My son had arranged it. The weight of signatures. There's something brutal about a signature. One moment, everything is yours. A pen scratches across paper, and suddenly, it isn't. The letter said I had consented, said I had signed. But my hands didn't remember signing. My memory didn't recall giving permission. Had he tricked me? Slipped papers in front of me, told me they were for insurance, for safety, for just in case. I couldn't remember. And that was the worst part. Doubt. I stared at my own name, inked on the page. It was my handwriting, yes. But was it my will? Or was it my trust, taken advantage of? I whispered to the empty kitchen. Is this what fatherhood buys you? You raise a child, you pour your life into him, and one day he pours you onto paper and files you away. The refrigerator hummed, indifferent. Flashbacks of sacrifice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every sacrifice I'd made for that boy. I remembered the nights I came home from the freight yard, hands raw, shoulders aching, lungs filled with dust, but still smiled when he came running to me with his little truck. "Daddy, play," he'd shout. And I played, no matter how tired I was. I remembered skipping meals so he could have seconds. Selling my tools once, just to pay for his textbooks. I remembered the Christmas I worked double shifts so he could wake up to the bike he'd begged for. He rode it until the tires wore down, and I never told him that bike cost me 2 weeks of groceries. And now he had taken the fruits of all those sacrifices and signed them away. Talking to Arthur. The next morning, I called Arthur. My voice trembled as I read the letter aloud. Arthur exploded on the other end. "He what? He transferred your benefits? Without telling you? That's not just betrayal, Ben, that's robbery dressed in paperwork." I tried to calm him. "Arthur, maybe he thought he was protecting me. Maybe he thought it was easier." "Easier for who?" Arthur barked. "For him, maybe. For the bank. But not for you. Protecting someone doesn't mean taking their choices away. It means standing by them, even when they stumble." His words stung, because they rang true. Mrs. Carter's wisdom. Later, Mrs. Carter stopped by with a jar of jam. She took one look at my face and said, "What's wrong, Benjamin? You look like someone told you Christmas was cancelled." I handed her the letter. She read it slowly, her lips tightening. When she finished, she set it down gently, like it was a snake she didn't want to startle. "Paper can be powerful," she said. "It can open doors or lock them. But don't you forget, people are powerful too. You're not helpless just because your name got twisted on some forms." I sighed. "But what can I do? It's signed. It's done." She leaned forward, eyes fierce. "Then fight. Maybe not with fists, maybe not with shouting, but with truth, with stubbornness, with every ounce of dignity you've got left." Her words were like steel slipped into my spine. The letter to Marlene. That evening, I sat at my desk with Marlene's photo watching me from the corner. I pulled out my notebook and wrote a letter not to my son, not to the lawyers, but to her. "My love, they've taken what we built, the savings, the security, the safety net we always talked about. Our boy signed it away. I don't know if he thought he was helping or if he simply wanted control. But I feel erased. I feel like a guest in my own life. What do I do?" The page stayed silent, but writing it down made the weight easier to carry. The confrontation. The next day, I decided I couldn't hide. When my son came by to check on me, I slid the letter across the table. "What is this?" I asked. He glanced at it, then looked away. "It's just paperwork, Dad. Legal stuff. It keeps things organized. It keeps you safe." "Safe?" My voice cracked. "Safe from what? From myself? From my own money? From the life I built?" He rubbed his forehead. "You don't understand. These things get complicated. It's easier this way. I can handle it." I slammed my hand on the table. "Easier for you, maybe, but not for me. You've taken my voice out of the story. Do you understand that? You've turned me into a signature on a page, nothing more." His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. And in that silence, I realized something. Maybe he truly believed he was protecting me. Or maybe he just didn't want the burden. Either way, he had taken what wasn't his to take. The notebook. Again. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote, "First, they left me behind. Now they take my name off the page. But names are more than ink. They are memories, promises, the stubborn beat of a heart that refuses to stop. They cannot take that, not with all the signatures in the world. I closed the notebook and whispered to the photo of Marlene, "They can take the money, they can take the papers, but they will not take me." Reflection. Paperwork and promises, they look the same on the outside. Words, ink, signatures, but one binds families together and the other tears them apart. And as I sat in that quiet house, staring at the letter that said my life no longer belonged to me, I made a decision. I wasn't done. Not yet. This story wasn't over. Coming back to the house after everything that had happened felt like walking into a memory that hadn't decided whether to welcome me or punish me. It was familiar. Yes, the paint still yellow, the porch light still leaning to the left, the same creak on the third step. But it was also strange, like a place that had been holding its breath, waiting to see whether I would still fit inside. That morning, the safety assessor was coming, the one Marcus insisted on. Her job was to walk through every inch of my home and tell me if I was safe or if I was one stumble away from being packed off permanently. Gathering of allies. Arthur arrived first, his old Ford rattling into the driveway like a loyal dog that refused to die. He climbed out slow, gripping the doorframe, knees stiff from years of lifting crates. He squinted up at the house and shook his head. "Still yellow," he muttered. "I figured Marcus would have painted it grey by now. Everything's grey with that boy these days. Grey ties, grey suits, grey words. Yellow suits the place," I said. Arthur spat in the grass. "Greys for tombstones, yellows for life. Don't let him change it." Before I could answer, Mrs. Carter bustled across the lawn, apron pockets bulging with notebooks and pens. She had a notepad clutched under one arm like she was about to cross-examine me. "Benjamin," she said sharply, "don't argue with Arthur about paint. He's been wrong about colors since 1973, when he painted his shed orange. People still talk about it like it was a crime scene." Arthur threw up his hands. "It was hunting season. I wanted it visible." She ignored him, marched up to me, and pointed her pen like a sword. "Where are the rugs? Don't tell me you've been walking around on loose rugs. Those things are death traps. Treacherous. You'll break your hip faster than you can say casserole." "They're just rugs," I said. "They're assassins disguised as rugs," she snapped, scribbling furiously in her notebook. A few minutes later, Marcus pulled up, still in his work, shirt and tie, sleeves rolled halfway up like he wanted to prove he could get his hands dirty. He carried a roll of blue painter's tape like a soldier brandishing a weapon. "Morning," he said, nodding at Arthur and Mrs. Carter like generals gathering for war. "Figured I'd get a head start, taping rugs before the assessor arrives." Mrs. Carter pointed toward the kitchen. "Start with the one that nearly murdered your father last month." I tripped, I muttered. "It wasn't murder." "Don't defend rugs, Benjamin," she snapped. Enter Denise. At exactly 9:30, a small sedan pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Denise, the assessor. She wore sneakers that didn't squeak, dark slacks, and glasses repaired with a strip of tape. Her clipboard looked like it had been through 100 battles. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I'm here to make sure your house holds you, not the other way around." Arthur leaned toward me and whispered, "I like her already." Denise wasted no time. She stepped inside, eyes sweeping across the room like a detective. She didn't touch anything without asking, but she saw everything. "Bathroom inspection." "Bathroom first," she said, heading down the hall. She tapped the tile with her shoe. "Slippery." She pointed at the towel rack. "Not strong enough. If you grab this when you fall, it'll snap right off. Needs a grab bar here and here." "I don't need grab bars," I protested. She looked me dead in the eye. "You don't need them until you do. And when you do, it'll be too late." Arthur nodded. "Makes sense." Denise moved on, scribbling notes. Kitchen adjustments. In the kitchen, she eyed the high cabinet where Marlene used to keep the good china. "Do you still climb on a chair to reach those?" Not since I realized gravity doesn't negotiate, I said. She smiled. Smart man, but let's move them lower anyway. Dust is safer than ladders. She checked the stove, the counters, the phone. You need a landline with big buttons, something you can hit even half asleep. Marcus nodded, already writing it down. Hallway and living room. In the hallway, Denise squinted at the dim bulb overhead. Needs brighter light. Shadows hide falls. The grade down, Huon Ditley lice, and the staff. In the living room, she crouched, pressed her thumb into the carpet, and looked at Marcus. Loose. Tape it down, or get rid of it. Marcus unrolled his blue tape and got to work, crouched like a soldier on the battlefield. Arthur muttered something about tape finally being useful for once. Mrs. Carter scribbled more notes. Non-slip mats, shoes with grip, less clutter. They're not clutter, I said. They're magazines. History. History that will trip you to death, she shot back. Backyard and birdhouse. Finally, Denise stepped into the backyard. The maple tree swayed in the breeze, the birdhouse Marlene painted, still hanging, nailed shut. Didn't realize you had tenants, Denise said, tilting her head. As if on cue, a sparrow darted out through a crack in the wood, defying the nail. Arthur laughed. Life insists, doesn't it? Denise nodded. Yes, it does. The verdict. By the time she finished, her clipboard looked like a grocery receipt. Grab bars in bathroom. Bright lights in hallway there's not. Secure or remove rugs. Non-slip mats. Lower storage. Landline phone in every room. She tore the sheet from her clipboard and handed it to me. If you want to stay here, you can. With these changes, your house will be safer than any facility with a fountain in the lobby. Arthur clapped his hands. There you go. Home isn't magic. It's maintenance. Mrs. Carter scribbled the line like scripture. Home is maintenance, she repeated. Marcus cleared his throat. Dad, if you want to come back home, I'll support it. I'll help make the changes. I'll even stay some nights if you need me. But you've got to promise you'll let people help. I looked at him. The boy, who once scowled at lug nuts, now scowling at fear. And I nodded. I promise. That evening, that night, back at the facility, I sat on the narrow bed with Denise's list in my lap. It didn't feel like a prison sentence. It felt like an invitation. For the first time in weeks, I believed I might walk out of there with more than I walked in with. And I thought to myself, maybe the house remembers me after all. Sunday dinner had always been the rhythm of my life, long before the word facility entered my vocabulary, long before paperwork and polite paragraphs began to shape my days. There had always been the long table. When Marlene was alive, Sundays meant smells of cornbread drifting through the house, pots simmering on the stove, and Marcus, or whichever friend he dragged along, sprawled on the floor waiting for the call to eat. The table wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a promise. No matter what the week had taken from us, Sunday would give something back. After she passed, and after my son started talking more about responsibility and trust funds than biscuits and gravy, the long table became a memory folded into dust, until Arthur, stubborn as a bull, decided to resurrect it even if we had to do it in the multi-purpose room of the facility. Setting the scene, Arthur arrived first, lugging folding chairs in his arms like a soldier hauling supplies. His plaid shirt was ironed crooked, but his grin was steady. "Can't have a Sunday dinner without seats," he declared, dropping them in a line. "These plastic excuses they keep in here, one sneeze and you're on the floor. We're doing this right, Mrs. Carter came next, bustling through the lobby with a pan of biscuits wrapped in a towel. Her apron pockets bulged with utensils, napkins, and knowing her, probably a measuring spoon she'd smuggled from her own kitchen. "Benjamin," she said, scolding before she even set down the biscuits, "if you don't eat at least 3 of these tonight, I'll never forgive you." Behind her came Sheila, balancing a wooden salad bowl so large it looked like she'd stolen it from a farmhouse. She smiled shyly, set it carefully in the center of the tables, and smoothed her dress as if making sure she had a right to belong here. Finally, Marcus appeared. Not with contracts or clipped words, not with forms for me to sign. He came carrying 2 pizza boxes under one arm, sheepish as a boy who'd brought the wrong homework. "Thought we'd balance tradition with convenience," he said. "Not everything has to be home-cooked to count." Arthur barked a laugh. "As long as it's hot, it counts." The aide with the forearms of a tree trunk passed by, curious about the noise. When she saw the growing feast, she grinned. "What's this? A rebellion?" "Family dinner," Arthur declared. She disappeared, only to return 5 minutes later with a plate of cookies the size of saucers. "In case conversation needs sugar," she said, winking. Together, we pushed the folding tables side by side until they wobbled into one long, imperfect stretch. We threw plain white cloths over them, the same cloths the facility used for bingo night. It wasn't lace, it wasn't Marlene's best, but it would do. When the food was laid out, biscuits steaming, salad glistening, pizza boxes opened like treasure chests, the room shifted. For one night, the multi-purpose room stopped being a bland space of bingo and exercise classes. It became a kitchen again. The meal. I sat at the head of the table, not because I asked to, but because the others naturally drifted into place around me. Old habits have a way of surviving, even after everything else has changed. Arthur raised his paper cup of water. To family blood, borrowed and chosen, and to meals that remind us who we are. Cups clinked, and then the eating began. The biscuits disappeared first. Mrs. Carter slapped hands away when people reached too fast. "One at a time," she scolded, even as she snuck a second one herself. Sheila's salad, to her surprise, was the next to vanish. Arthur groaned after his second helping. "I'll be damned, this green stuff ain't half bad." Even the pizzas didn't last long. Arthur claimed he hadn't eaten pizza since 1987, then devoured 3 slices in 10 minutes. Storytelling. It wasn't long before the food became background noise and the stories took over. Marcus leaned back, grinning at Arthur. "Tell me again about the truck in 79. Arthur's eyes lit up. "Transmission weighed as much as a cow. Thought I could lift it myself. Ben here warned me, said gravity doesn't negotiate. I didn't listen. My knee's been sending me angry letters ever since." Marcus laughed. That open laugh I hadn't heard from him since he was a boy. For a moment, I saw the 12-year-old who used to sprawl on the floor with toy cars, eyes wide at every story. Sheila chimed in with a memory of her grandmother hiding dollar bills in cookbooks. Mrs. Carter confessed she once skipped Bible study to play bingo and swore the Lord forgave her because she only won $5. Even the aide joined in, reciting a haiku she had written about bleach. "Strong scent, bright promise, you erase yesterday's stains." Rooms breathed new again. The table erupted with laughter and applause. As for me, I mostly listened. I sat there, soaking in the sound of voices weaving together. I felt less like a relic and more like a man at the center of something alive. The confrontation turned confession. When the plates were scraped clean and the crumbs sat stubbornly on the cloth, Marcus stood. He didn't clear his throat or fidget with his tie. He just placed his hands flat on the table and spoke. "Dad," he said, his voice steady, "I cancelled the open house. The property's off the market. Tomorrow, I'll sign the revocation papers with Elena. I'll move the accounts back. I can't undo what's been done, but I can do this part right." The room fell still. Even the air seemed to pause. Marcus looked around, his eyes meeting mine last. "I thought responsibility meant securing everything, controlling it, winning at life like it was a game. But I forgot that keeping doesn't mean locking things down. It means holding people close. Mom would have told me that sooner." I felt my chest tighten. "She did tell you," I said quietly. "You just needed to read it in the right handwriting." His eyes glistened. I'm trying now, Dad. I'm trying. Aftermath. Silence followed, not heavy, but sacred. Then Sheila reached for Marcus's hand. Mrs. Carter dabbed her eyes with her apron. Arthur raised his cup in salute. About damn time, Arthur muttered. The moment passed, but it lingered in the air, like the aftertaste of something rich. The clean-up. We cleared plates together. Arthur stacked chairs with the precision of a freight hauler. Mrs. Carter wrapped leftover biscuits in napkins, pressing them into people's hands like party favors. Sheila collected forks and cups, humming softly. When the last chair was pushed against the wall, the room looked empty again. But it wasn't empty. Not to me. It still carried the echo of laughter, the warmth of belonging. I stayed behind for a while after everyone left, sitting alone at the long table. The white cloth was stained with crumbs and pizza grease, but to me it looked like lace again. For the first time in years I felt full, not just in my stomach, but in my soul. Reflection. That night, lying on the narrow bed back in my room, I thought about what had happened. The long table had been reborn, not perfect, not polished, but alive. It reminded me of something Marlene once said, "A table isn't about what's on it. It's about who's around it." She was right. The table wasn't just wood and screws. It was the place where we found each other again, where my son confessed his change of heart, where laughter drowned out bitterness. And as I drifted off to sleep, I realized something important. Maybe I wasn't furniture after all. Maybe I was still part of the circle. The morning I left the facility, the sky was the kind of blue that seems almost too bright to be real. Not the pale, washed-out blue you get in winter, but the deep, confident blue that tells you the world is alive and moving, whether you keep up with it or not. I'd packed the night before. Not much, just some clothes, my notebook, a few photographs of Marlene, and the cap she'd given me. The suitcase was lighter than the one I had prepared weeks ago for the holiday trip I never took, but my heart felt heavier. This time, I wasn't being told I couldn't go. This time, I was choosing to go back home, leaving the facility. As I stood in the lobby, Arthur clapped me on the back hard enough to rattle my bones. "About damn time," he said. Mrs. Carter hugged me like she was sending a soldier off to war. "Don't you dare forget to eat," she scolded, tears glistening in her eyes. "And if you trip on one of those rugs, I'll come tape them down myself. No mint and never teens, so the pose way. No stays." Marcus hovered nearby, car keys in hand, but I shook my head. "No," I said. "I want to walk." He looked at me like I was crazy. "Dad, it's 2 miles. 2 miles is nothing to a man who's carried freight his whole life. Besides, I want to feel the road under me again. I want to see if I still know the way." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll follow in the car, just in case." The first steps. The moment I stepped outside, the air hit me different. At the facility, air always smelled faintly of bleach and boiled vegetables. Out here, it smelled like grass, like asphalt warming under the sun, like freedom. I started down the sidewalk, suitcase rolling behind me. Each step felt both fragile and defiant, like I was daring gravity to try me again. Cars passed, some slowing as drivers glanced at the old man trudging along with a suitcase. I didn't care. Let them look. This was my walk, my return. Arthur and Mrs. Carter drove ahead, honking and waving like a parade escort. Marcus idled behind in his car, window down, watching me like a nervous shepherd. Memories. Along the road. As I walked, the road unfolded memories. There was the diner where Marlene and I used to get coffee on Sundays after church. She always ordered apple pie just to taste it, then ate half of mine too. The diner was gone now, replaced by a chain pharmacy. But if I squinted, I could still see her at the booth by the window, laughing with sugar packets between her fingers. Further down, I passed the park where I taught Marcus to ride his bike. I could almost hear his 12-year-old voice. "Don't let go, Dad." I had let go, of course, and he had wobbled, then steadied, then soared. For a moment I wondered if that was what I was doing now, letting go of the facility, wobbling into freedom again. Marcus's worry. After a mile, Marcus pulled up beside me. "Dad, you need a break?" I wiped sweat from my forehead but shook my head. "Not yet. A man needs to earn his homecoming." He frowned. "You don't have to prove anything." "Yes, I do," I said firmly. "To myself, to this old body, to the house waiting at the end of this road." He sighed, but there was pride in his eyes too. A rival. At last, the yellow siding of the house appeared in the distance. My chest tightened. It looked the same and different all at once. The porch light still leaned like it always had, but the paint was a little duller. The birdhouse Marlene painted still hung from the maple, though weather had worn its colors down to faint whispers. When I reached the front gate, my legs trembled not just from the walk, but from the flood of memory. I stood there for a long moment, suitcase at my side, staring at the house like it was an old friend I hadn't seen in years. Arthur shouted from the truck, "Well, don't just stand there, Ben. Go on in." Mrs. Carter honked the horn and waved her notebook at me like a victory flag. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "Welcome home, Dad." Crossing the threshold, I stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under my weight. The smell hit me first. The scent of wood, dust, and faint traces of Marlene's perfume lingering in curtains that hadn't been washed in too long. Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered. The rug in the hallway, taped down now by Marcus's blue strips. The cabinet lowered. The new grab bars in the bathroom glinting under the light. It wasn't the same house I had left. It was safer, sturdier, a little more forgiving. But it was still mine. I dropped the suitcase by the door and whispered, "I'm back." Sitting in the kitchen. I walked into the kitchen, my favorite place. The table sat there like an old companion, its surface scarred with years of meals and homework and arguments. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and let my hand rest on the wood. Marcus sat across from me. For once, he didn't come with papers, didn't ask for signatures. He just sat, watching me, as if waiting for me to say whether this was enough. I looked around the room, the cabinets, the stove, the window that caught the afternoon light, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. "This is home," I said softly. Marcus nodded. It always was. Reflection. That night, I lay in my own bed, the mattress sagging in the middle, the sheets smelling faintly of old linen and sunlight. I stared at the ceiling cracks that had once looked like constellations. I thought of the walk, of the diner, of the park, of the birdhouse. I thought of the faces around the long table. I thought of Marlene's photo watching over me from the dresser. And I realized something. I wasn't just back in my house. I was back in my life. The house had remembered me. And I, finally, had remembered myself. For weeks after I came home, I convinced myself that I had found balance again. I followed Denise's list: grab bars in the bathroom, brighter bulbs in the hallway, rugs taped down like prisoners of war. I told myself, "See, Benjamin, you're safe. You can manage this house." And for a while it was true. Each morning I made my toast, scribbled notes in my notebook, and walked the familiar paths of my home. The house and I leaned on each other, two old companions trying to outlast time. But safety, I learned, is a fragile illusion. One careless moment, and the floor reminds you just how mortal you are. The laundry. It happened on a Tuesday. Ordinary, quiet. Sunlight poured through the curtains, turning the dust in the air into tiny golden flecks. I decided I would do the laundry, something small, something normal. The basket wasn't even full, just a week's worth of shirts, socks, and trousers. But pride is a heavier weight than cotton. I wanted to prove to myself that I could still manage. "Just one trip," I muttered, gripping the basket. The hallway seemed longer that day. My hip ached, my balance wavered, but I pressed on. Then the basket shifted. My foot caught the edge of the rug, even taped. It betrayed me, and the world tilted. I hit the floor hard. The sound was louder than it should have been, echoing off the walls. The basket toppled, clothes spilling like a defeated flag around me. Pain shot through my hip, sharp and merciless. I gasped, the ceiling spinning above me. For a moment I thought, so this is it. This is how they'll find me. The crawl. I tried to push myself up. My arms trembled, my legs screamed. The grab bar near the bathroom was inches out of reach. Inches, but impossible. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain. I, Benjamin, the man who once hauled freight through snowstorms, who lifted engines with Arthur, who built this home with his own hands, was sprawled like a broken doll in his own hallway. I lay there, chest heaving, and whispered, "Not like this. Not again. This is what he subsaid seen, the outiv no seans, or outiv even a mara." Then I saw the phone on the kitchen counter, just a crawl away. Inch by inch, I dragged myself, the floor cold against my cheek. Every movement sent fire through my hip, but I kept going. Finally, I reached the phone, hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I pressed the speed dial for Marcus. "Dad?" His voice was sharp, alert. "Son," I croaked, "I need help." Marcus arrives. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. But it felt like an hour before I heard tires screeching outside. The door flew open, and Marcus rushed in, tie askew, eyes wide with panic. "Dad!" He dropped to his knees beside me. "What happened?" "Laundry 1," I muttered. He almost laughed, but fear kept it trapped in his throat. "Don't move. Just stay still." Behind him came Sheila, calm and steady, her hands gentle as she examined my side. "Bruised," she said. "Doesn't feel broken, but we need to be careful." Marcus's hands trembled as he brushed hair from my forehead. "I should have hired someone. I should have—" "Stop!" I snapped, my voice hoarse. "Don't turn this into another excuse to take control. Sometimes people fall. It's the cost of standing." His eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose you, Dad." "You won't," I said. "Not today. Now help me up before the neighbors peek in and think I'm having a picnic on the floor." The spire governed reinforcements. Minutes later, Arthur stormed in, summoned by Sheila. His boots thundered down the hall. "What the hell happened?" he barked. "Laundry," I groaned. Arthur glared at the basket like it was a traitor. "Laundry? That's treason. Should have burned those socks years ago." With Sheila's steady instructions and Marcus's shaking hands, they lifted me into a chair. Pain radiated through me, but sitting upright felt like winning a battle. The doctor's verdict. The doctor came later, brisk and young, carrying the authority of someone who hadn't lived long enough to know how fragile everything becomes. She examined me, sent me for x-rays, and returned with the verdict. No fracture, just a deep bruise. "Painful, yes, but you'll heal," Arthur grunted. "Told you he's too stubborn to break." The doctor smiled. "He'll need rest, no heavy lifting, and no more heroics." Arthur muttered, "Good luck with that last part." The argument. That night, Marcus sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked more like a boy than a banker, his tie gone, his shoulders slumped. "Dad," he said softly, "this proves it. You can't be alone. Maybe not the facility, but someone here, full-time. A nurse, anything." I slammed my palm on the table. "I will not be caged, Marcus. Not again." "It's not a cage," he argued. "It's protection." Arthur snorted from the corner. "Protection can turn into prison real quick." Sheila touched Marcus's arm. "Listen to him. He knows what he wants." Marcus's voice broke. I don't know how to keep you safe without taking something from you." I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. "Then, stop trying to keep me safe. Keep me living. There's a difference." The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus buried his face in his hands. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. "You'll learn," I said. "You'll have to." Reflection. That night, lying in bed with pain throbbing through my side, I thought about the fall. Falling is humiliating. It makes you question your worth, your strength, your place in the world. But as I stared at the cracks in the ceiling, I realized something. Falling is not the same as failing. Failure is staying down. Failure is letting others decide what you can or cannot be. And I wasn't done yet. The week after my fall was filled with slow movements and stubborn pride. Every time I winced, Marcus winced twice as hard. Sheila hovered too, bringing soup and reminding me to rest. Even Arthur dropped by more often than usual, pretending he needed my advice on fixing things he had already fixed. But the real turning point came when Sheila said, "Dad, there's something coming up. My family's throwing me a baby shower, and I want you there." At first, I balked. A baby shower? I was an old man with bruised ribs, not a guest of honor. "I'll just get in the way," I muttered. Sheila knelt in front of me, her hand on my knee. "You won't get in the way. You'll be the story. This baby deserves to meet her grandfather's presence even before she sees his face." Arriving at the shower was held in Sheila's sister's backyard. When Marcus pulled the car into the driveway, balloons bobbed on the fence posts. Pink and white streamers fluttered in the breeze. Tables groaned under platters of food and towers of wrapped presents. Children darted between folding chairs, their laughter spilling like music. Women in pastel dresses carried trays of cookies shaped like rattles and bottles. Someone had hung a banner that read, "Welcome, baby Grace." I froze at the sight of that name. "Grace?" I whispered. Sheila smiled. "We decided Grace, because she's already a gift." The word hit me like a benediction. Grace. Not money, not property, not paperwork. Grace. The circle of women. Inside the circle of women, Sheila sat like a queen, her belly round, her face glowing. They passed her tiny clothes, onesies patterned with flowers, blankets soft as clouds, bottles small enough to fit in my palm. When they pressed a onesie into my hands, one of the women said, "Grandpa, hold it up so we can see." "Grandpa." The word cracked something inside me. I held up the fabric, my fingers trembling. It was impossibly small, smaller than the work gloves I used to wear in the freight yard. And suddenly, memories flooded Marcus's first cry, his tiny fists, the way Marlene had cradled him against her chest. I could almost hear her voice whispering promises I had forgotten. Old man at the party. At first, I felt out of place. My suit was old, my movements slow. I was surrounded by youth, by women who talked quickly, by games I didn't understand, guess the baby food flavor, pin the diaper on the teddy bear. But then a little girl toddled up to me, clutching a cookie. She looked at me with big eyes and asked, "Are you the baby's grandpa?" I smiled. "I suppose I am." She nodded, satisfied, and handed me half her cookie. "Then you should have this." I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. Out of the mouths of children sometimes comes truth. Conversations. As the party swirled around us, Marcus sat beside me. "Dad, I know I've made mistakes, big ones, but seeing you here today, holding that onesie, I realize something. Money isn't legacy. This is..." He gestured to the yard, to Sheila, to the life growing inside her. I nodded slowly. "Your mother knew that. She always said home is where you're allowed to be yourself." I forgot it for a while. Maybe you did too. The Cantigrade Frusos. He swallowed hard. "Then let's remember together. The gift." When it came time for gifts, I didn't have a wrapped box or a shiny bow. Instead, I pulled out my notebook. On the first page, I had written, "For Grace, when you're old enough to read this, know that your grandfather fell, but he always got up, and so will you. That's our family's gift, not wealth, not property, but stubborn hope." I handed the notebook to Sheila. "This is my gift. For her. A record of a life that stumbled, but kept walking." She pressed it to her chest, tears in her eyes. "It's perfect." The reflection. As the sun dipped low, lanterns flickered on. The laughter softened into conversations. The children grew sleepy, and the yard filled with that hushed warmth only families know. I sat back, watching Sheila's belly as she laughed, watching Marcus hold her hand, watching strangers become kin around a long table of food. And I thought, maybe legacy isn't about what you leave behind. Maybe it's about what you witness before you go. The baby hadn't even been born yet, but she had already given me something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. Night drive home. On the drive home, the car was quiet. Marcus kept glancing at me in the mirror, as if afraid I might vanish. Finally, he said, "Dad, do you think I'll be a good father?" This is the Bressism non-starred. I looked at him, the man who had betrayed me with paperwork, who had hurt me with words, but who now sat trembling like a boy, asking permission to grow up. "Yes," I said, "not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to admit you're not. That's what makes a father." He nodded, eyes glistening. Reflection. That night, in my bed, I held the little onesie they had let me take home as a keepsake. I pressed it to my chest and whispered to Marlene's photo, "She'll know you too, through me, through Marcus, through Grace herself. She'll know the love we carried forward." And for the first time in a long while, I slept without fear of falling. I had started to believe the worst was behind me. After the baby shower, after seeing Grace's tiny clothes and hearing her name on everyone's lips, I felt like I had finally stepped out of the shadow of betrayal. My house was safer, my son softer, my place in the circle restored. But safety is slippery. Just when you think you've found your footing, the ground shifts under you. A Tuesday morning. It was a Tuesday. Why is it always a Tuesday? The day had begun simply. I'd scribbled in my notebook, brewed my coffee, made toast. Outside, the birds sang as if the world had no sharp edges. The laundry basket sat in the corner, half full. I stared at it, stubbornness gnawing at me. Everyone had been fussing since my last fall, watching me like a hawk. I wanted to prove to myself, and maybe to them, that I could still manage something so ordinary. So I lifted it. "One trip," I muttered. "Just one." Halfway down the hallway, my hip twinged. I shifted my weight, the basket tilted, and suddenly my foot slid on the edge of the rug. The same rug Marcus had taped, the same rug Denise had warned about. And the floor rushed up to greet me. On the floor again. The impact stole my breath. Pain shot through my side like fire. The basket toppled, spilling clothes across the floor again, shirts and socks, scattered like white flags of surrender. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The cracks looked like constellations again, mocking me. Not again. Not here. Not like this. I tried to push myself up, but my hips screamed, my arm buckled, my breath came ragged. The grab bar was just out of reach, like salvation dangling inches away. "Not again," I whispered. I crawled, inch by inch. My palms burned against the floor, my ribs groaned with each movement. Every second felt like an hour, every inch like a mile. Finally, I reached the phone on the counter. My fingers shook as I pressed the speed dial. Marcus's panic. "Dad!" Marcus's voice was sharp, frightened. "Son, I'm down," I rasped. "I need help." He didn't ask questions. He didn't lecture. He just said, "I'm coming." "Well, no say." Minutes later, his car screeched into the driveway. He burst through the door, tie hanging loose, hair wild. He dropped to his knees beside me, face pale with fear. "Dad." His hands hovered, afraid to touch me wrong. "Are you all right?" "What happened?" "Laundry." I groaned. "Again?" His voice cracked. Sheila appeared behind him, calm as always, her hands cool and steady as she checked my side. "Not broken. Bruised badly, but not broken." Marcus's hands trembled. "I should have hired a nurse. I should have—" "Stop!" I hissed. "Don't you dare turn this into proof that I can't live my own life. Falling is part of living. Don't twist it into an excuse." His eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose you, Dad." "You won't," I said. "Not today. Not like this." Arthur's arrival. Minutes later, Arthur stormed in, summoned by Sheila. His boots shook the floor. What the hell happened this time? He barked. Laundry, I groaned again. Arthur glared at the basket as if it had personally betrayed him. Laundry? That's it. From now on you're naked, safer that way. Even through the pain, I laughed. Between Arthur's strength and Sheila's guidance, they lifted me into a chair. Marcus hovered like a man about to break, his hands fluttering uselessly. The doctor's words. The doctor came later, young, brisk, efficient. She examined me, ordered x-rays, and delivered the verdict. No fracture, just a bad bruise. Painful, but survivable. You'll heal, but you need rest. And no more carrying laundry. Arthur snorted. Told you, naked. The doctor ignored him. And no more heroics, accept help. That's the prescription, the argument. That night, Marcus sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked older than his years, his face lined with worry, his hands clenched. Dad, this proves it, he said quietly. You can't be alone. Not anymore. Maybe not the facility, but at least someone here. A nurse, full-time care something. I slammed my palm on the table, pain shooting through my side. I will not be caged, Marcus. Not again. It's not a cage, he argued. It's protection. Arthur, sitting nearby, snorted. Protection can turn into prison before you know it. Sheila placed a hand on Marcus's arm. He's right. Listen to your father. He knows what he wants. Marcus's voice broke. I don't know how to keep you safe without taking something from you. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Then stop trying to keep me safe. Keep me living. There's a difference. The words hung heavy. Marcus dropped his face into his hands, shoulders shaking. I don't know if I can, he whispered. You'll learn, I said softly, because you'll have to. The notebook. That night, lying in bed with my side aching, I opened my notebook. Falling is not failure. Failure is forgetting why you got up. Failure is letting fear decide for you, and I am not ready to fail. I set the pen down, closed the notebook, and stared at Marlene's photo. They want to keep me safe, I whispered to her. But you'd understand, wouldn't you? Safety without living isn't safety at all. Her silent smile seemed to agree. Reflection. That night, I realized something. Aging isn't about avoiding falls. It's about refusing to let the falls define you. It's about insisting stubbornly, painfully, that your story is still yours, even when the floor betrays you. And though my body ached, though Marcus's tears still haunted me, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't done living. Not yet. I used to believe that endings came with fanfare, with something loud and unmistakable like a trumpet or a curtain closing, but I've learned that most endings arrive quietly. Sometimes they sound like the squeak of hospital shoes on linoleum. Sometimes like the first cry of a newborn baby in the middle of the night. That's how my ending came, not as a finish line, but as a beginning in someone else's arms. The call. It was 2:17 inches the morning when the phone rang. I fumbled for it, hip aching, eyes blurry with sleep. Dad. Marcus's voice trembled with excitement and fear. It's time. We're at the hospital. Sheila's in labor. I was fully awake in an instant. My heart thudded like it hadn't in years. I'll be there, I said. Arthur showed up in his old Ford within minutes, grumbling about the hour but dressed like a man ready for duty. Mrs. Carter squeezed into the passenger seat, prayer book in hand, apron still tied at her waist, muttering verses under her breath. Climb in, Benjamin, Arthur barked. We're not missing history. The hospital. Hospitals are strange places, part battlefield, part sanctuary. The air smelled of antiseptic and nerves. The lights were too bright, the halls too long. We found Marcus pacing the waiting room, hair wild, tie shoved in his pocket. He looked like a boy again, waiting for news he couldn't control. She's pushing, he blurted out. The nurse said it could be a while. I put a hand on his shoulder. Then we wait. That's the job. Arthur grunted and collapsed into a chair. Mrs. Carter clasped her prayer book and began whispering psalms. The clock ticked louder than footsteps. Time bent and stretched, minutes turning into hours, then back into minutes. Finally, a nurse appeared. She smiled. "Congratulations, you have a healthy baby girl." Meeting Grace. When they let me into the room, Sheila was pale but glowing, her hair plastered to her forehead, eyes wet with joy. In her arms was a bundle no bigger than a loaf of bread, wrapped in pink. Marcus guided me forward. His voice cracked. "Dad, meet Grace." Grace. The name settled on me like a blessing. I held out my arms, trembling. The nurse placed her gently against me. She was warm, impossibly small, her breath soft against my chest. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, and in them I saw everything: Marlene's gentleness, Marcus's stubborn fire, and something brand new, something that belonged only to her. "Hello, Grace," I whispered. "Welcome home." Flashbacks in the moment. Holding her pulled me backward and forward all at once. I saw Marlene in another hospital room, decades earlier, cradling Marcus for the first time. I saw the boy. He'd been the scraped knees, the first bike ride, the young man in a tie shaking my hand like we were equals. I saw myself falling, doubting, breaking, and now I saw this tiny child, binding it all together. Proof that the story hadn't ended with me. Coming home with Grace. A week later, they brought Grace to my house for the first time. Balloons from the shower still floated in the corners, half deflated. The birdhouse outside swung in the wind, stubborn as ever. Mrs. Carter arrived with a casserole for the new parents. Arthur carried diapers like contraband, muttering about the price of poop collectors. We gathered in the kitchen. Grace slept in her bassinet, Sheila beaming beside her, Marcus hovering like a hawk. The room smelled of biscuits, baby powder, and something new: hope. I sat at the table, surrounded by voices, and realized I was no longer the center. And that was all right. The long table rebuilt. A month later, we pushed tables together again, this time in my house, not the facility. White cloths, dishes, food spilling over. Grace in her high chair, gurgling. The star of the show. Arthur told his transmission story. Mrs. Carter admitted she'd skipped bingo again. Sheila laughed so hard she cried. Marcus sat close to her, his eyes soft, his tie forgotten. And me, I sat back and listened. For once, I didn't need to be the anchor or the fighter or the man proving he still belonged. I just needed to be part of the circle, the notebook. That night, after everyone left, I opened my notebook for the last time. The pages were filled. Now lists, rants, memories, prayers. On the final page I wrote, "I spent my life saving for a future I thought I could control. But money isn't legacy. Houses aren't legacy. Legacy is laughter at a long table, hands lifting you when you fall, and a child who carries your name into tomorrow." I underlined the last line twice. What remains is love. I closed the notebook and set it next to Marlene's photo. Reflection. If you're listening now, maybe on a couch, maybe in a car, maybe in a kitchen that smells like toast, hear me. Life isn't about what you sign away. It isn't about the falls, or the bruises, or even the betrayals. It's about what you hold. Fiercely, gently, until you can't anymore. I'm Benjamin. I'm 78. I'm a father, a grandfather, a husband, still talking to his wife in the quiet. I've fallen, but I've gotten back up. And most of all, I'm home.